time here together this morning, at the end of the hot summer season. Thank you for your love for us, for your provision, and all the changes and chances of life. Thank you for your care and provision for all the people of the world. And open our hearts and minds to follow you, to listen carefully and closely for your voice, and to be obedient to your will. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Last year, I said at the beginning of my first sermon, first Sunday back from vacation, what I have said for approximately 23 years. Well, this is the 23rd time. I always do the same thing first Sunday back. And that is, Walter answered it last year.
Well, I answered it last year, but I set the theme for the whole season.
Set the theme for the season. That's what I do. You know, like, I love what I do as a minister. There are some parts of it that I could do without. Like the administration, I'm not a fan of administration. I think most of you would know this fairly easily, especially those who live with me. But the ministry aspect of things, I love. It's something I couldn't do without. So even when I'm away on vacation, there's no way I can turn off my mind, turn off my thoughts. And it is, frankly, a pleasure to have a week or two or a bunch of consecutive days where I don't have to do any of the stuff of ministry and can actually think about what ministry is about. And risking sounding a little bit arrogant, contemplating and praying over and thinking about what's God's call to the church today, and more particularly, of course, what I feel is God's call to St. Mary's. St. Mary's has been at a transition point now for a couple of years. We've been looking at many things in terms of the way we do church. We have had opportunity to listen to people like Tim Elliott, who invited us to enter into a process of looking at where God is leading us as a church. We've enjoyed a lot of new music, and Greg has picked up his guitar, and that adds a tremendous amount. We've looked at the world and the community around us. We had, over the past couple of years, obviously the opportunity to sponsor a refugee family. And there's been lots of things that we have had snippets of that seem to me to indicate some of the ways, some of the places to which God is leading St. Mary's. And that's what I want to address during the fall season. It is multifaceted, but loosely put, what I will call the fall is taking a look at the church and what God is calling us to be. I put that in News Bites this week, and Mark said the way I put it was particularly uninspiring. So perhaps News Bites was uninspiring. I hope that what I do is inspire us to have conversations and dialogue about these specifics, because it's the specifics that are exciting, not the words about the specifics, okay? From my perspective, there are, and this is not going to be news to all of you, there are 4 things about St. Mary's that are particularly noteworthy. And when I say that, you have to add a subtext there. If there's something that is particularly noteworthy about a group of Christians who are coming together, it seems to me that in those things which are noteworthy, special, one might even say in some circumstances unique, that maybe what we're perceiving is the leading of God's Spirit. And so I want to talk about those this morning. Just to give you the heading, the 4 are, and I'm sure all of you in one way or another will nod assent. One way in which St. Mary's is very special is in our music and our music program. Not just in our liturgy on Sunday morning, but also what we have done with music to develop it in terms of our concert, in terms of our community outreach, truthfully. And indeed, when Mark Dunwoody, the new youth coordinator for the diocese, visited us earlier in the summer, just after music camp, he was blown away by the music. He was blown away by the music, the quality of it, and also by the congregational participation. And even though for most of us anyway, St. Mary's is our home and it's our, it's our, this is where we live our spiritual life, and we don't really have a sense necessarily of all that's going on everywhere. What is happening at St. Mary's musically is unique and special. And I believe particularly in some of the songs that have been written by members of the congregation, we see some insight into where God is leading us. And I believe that musically, not only is God leading us to reach out with our music, but He's leading us to reach in as well. And when you turn inward, there is a danger of becoming spiritually narcissistic and making our spirituality about ourselves and our own needs. But the deep inward journey can also be profoundly spiritual and a way of becoming more and more in touch with what God wants to do in us and in His world. Just to underscore that, again, at the risk of sounding arrogant or at the very least presumptuous, as a minister of a church, one of the things that I consider it incumbent on me to do is to listen to people, their stories of faith, where they feel God is working, their experiences they find beneficial, and start connecting the dots. Because if God is leading some of us in one direction, I think He's probably leading us as a group in that direction. If I start hearing the same thing all over the place, it just makes sense to me that God is trying to get our attention in that particular area. Just before the service this morning, you didn't know I was going to say this, but just before the service this morning, I was talking to Jackie about her trip to Europe, and she went to Taizé in France. And we haven't spoken about Taizé very much here. Some of you, the word will sound familiar. It has reintroduced into the church a whole new way of praying and meditation through repetitive music. And while that may sound boring in and of itself, when you get into it, it really is not. And this is something that Jackie was saying that she found very, very valuable. We'll be talking about it more, and I'll give more detail. But if this is something that Jackie is saying, and others are saying in the congregation, that the music helps them go inward and helps connect them with God, then this is something that seems to me that we must intentionally develop. So music, it seems to me, is one of the ways in which God is leading us. A second area, and these are not in order of priority, a second area, clearly our youth ministry. Again, Mark said that what we've done consistently over the years in our youth ministry, we've had some rather interesting highs and some, maddening lows, but consistently, St. Mary's has supported and encouraged youth ministry. And I've said this again, it is not false flattery, but it is the case that if the adult congregation doesn't support youth ministry, it will not happen in the church. There are all sorts of ways of suborning things. From which the word insubordination comes from. That's another story, another sermon. There's all sorts of ways of suborning things, and it is very easy to destroy any ministry initiative. And youth ministry is one of those ministries that can be undermined and extinguished instantly. At the risk of being, speaking out of turn, I was reading this week the parish profile of a church looking for a priest. And one of the things that they lament is that once upon a time they had a very strong youth program, now they don't even have Sunday school. Knowing this parish somewhat, one, because it's in our rough geographic area, big geographic area, and when I was archdeacon, I had several dealings with this parish. As I was reading this, they were lamenting it, but I was saying, why would any young person be caught dead in the church? You do the best you can to turn them off and do not welcome them. The only way they're welcome is if they become little mini yous and put on the right clothes on Sunday and serve the altar in a way that feeds your ego as opposed to their needs. That's what a congregation can do, and you will destroy youth ministry quickly. St. Mary's has a firm youth ministry. I did it in the parish profile when I was hired in 1989, and it has continued to do so, and evidenced by Kirkland days, and the tremendous parish support in many ways for that, and not to mention our youth groups and projects such as that. The third thing that I'll talk about is our social justice. No, actually, I think I'll do the seniors ministry first. Seniors ministry. You know the stories, I don't need to repeat it, about how hard it is for residences, seniors residences, to get a minister to come in even once a month to do a communion service. You have heard me say this with varying degrees of body English, how I just don't understand that. On the one hand, we lament the sometimes perceived, I think it's more often perceived than real, hostility towards church and society. I think it's more myth now than reality. But then when the opportunity to do ministry is there, we often don't take advantage of it. And let me just, I'll say this wasn't originally part of this part of the sermon, but this week Jane and I and Bethany went to Vivalis to do our service. It was a very small service. What was it? There were 4 or 5 of them. We had a high of 15, 16 a couple of years ago. However, in a place like Vivalis, your clientele is transient. And I don't mean transient from place to place, transient from here to eternity. So the numbers are down. And Nicole had a very good conversation with Nicole, the program coordinator, after. Because she's worried that with numbers so low, we're going to fail and say it's like we just can't justify it. My philosophy has always been where 2 or 3 are gathered. As long as there's a congregation, we will do a service there in one form or another. It may happen that sometime in the near future, for some reason, Jane and I show up and nobody be either ready or fit or prepared for a service, and it'll just be Jane and I, but there'll be a community service there. It's me. And we will pray for that place. And we will continue to be open to opportunities to serve in this way. It seems to me that seniors ministry, or ministry to those who aren't able to physically participate in our community life, is one of the things that God's called us to. And we will continue to perceive that. So that's the other part. And the 4th is social justice. It's so interesting. And I know I get into all sorts of theological gymnastics with you over this. But the basis for admission to the kingdom at the end of Matthew's gospel is how we treat one another. It's the poor in your midst. How do you respond to them? The lonely in your midst. How do you respond to them? The hungry in your midst. How do you respond to them? So you can have any type of glorious liturgy, music, or parish program you like, but if you're not reaching out in love and compassion, can I just sort of parallel that with just the catchphrase, social justice? If you're not doing that as a congregation, you're not doing your ministry. You simply aren't. And this I will absolutely promise you, I guarantee 100%. When a congregation is open to opportunities for service in God's hurting world, open, you will not have to pursue opportunities and avenues. They will come to you. And here I'm going to digress from the sermon, but say something important that I was going to do in announcements, but I decided to do in the sermon as well. Before going on vacation, I spoke to you of a refugee family in need. And what it said was, I became aware of this because when our refugee sponsorship program that our youth group had funded, in large part, came to an end, there was some money left in the bank. It was about $5,400. And that money, that leftover money, obviously it's not ours to go out to Baskin Robbins with, get that money from somewhere else. So half of it was sent to Action Refugee Montreal, and half of it was sent to the Province Rural Youth Development Fund. So it was $2,700 plus to the Province Rural Youth Development Fund. Carolyn Vandalik, who was a project coordinator for the Private's 50th anniversary, 50 families for 50 families, 50 families for 50 years, spoke to Glenn Williams of Action Refugee. And she spoke particularly about a project in the Diocese of Nova Scotia and Halifax, where there was a church that had sponsored the family over, and there's still relatives over there. And this church was tapped out, and so Carolyn was thrilled, because this meant that some more money to be ready to bring over the best of the family. And so I pursued this. Glenn was speaking with Glenn about this. And it turns out that the Primus Fund, with our $2,700 and some of their money, has managed to get around $10,000, and the church has raised about $2,000. But don't forget, this isn't their first gig at the camp. They've been doing this. They've sponsored 5 families in total. But that left $10,000. And so I spoke to Glennis about this, and I spoke to you a bit, and I said, like, is this something that we could take up? Like, that we could pick up on? And overwhelmingly the response was, yeah, it's only $10,000, let's do it. But then what do you do? Because this is a family. It's called in the system travel ready, which means that all the documentation is done, all the visas, all the medical checks, all the rest. It's just, all they need is their airplane tickets, and they're here. They're approved. I'll give you a little bit about the circumstances. I've learned a little more. A number of years ago, this family was living in a refugee camp in Jordan. And we have no conception. We have no conception. I was thinking of this sermon sitting in a tent trailer with electricity, with a microwave, with a porta potty, within walking distance of a real, flushing toilet, and this is roughing it in Canada. We have no idea, no idea. Anyway, what they did was they sent over the daughter and her children, because obviously the only way a family can come over is bits and pieces, because however many. It's a big sponsorship, so they send them over bits and pieces. So the daughter came over with her children. Her parents and her brother were left in the refugee camp. Well, her parents and brother are no longer in the refugee camp. They're in Damascus. That ring any bells about the world lately? Damascus, Syria. The daughter calls. And every day that she calls, she hopes the phone is answered. Because when she calls, she hears the shelling and the machine guns in the background. And that's what her mom and dad and 24-year-old, I think, brother, is living with, day by day. And they're travel ready. They're ready. All they need is $10,000. And so I came to the people of St. Mary's, the good people of St. Mary's, who literally, in some ways, have a reputation around Canada now. And not because of the elegance of our building, but rather because of what we do. And I said, can you lend $10,000 to the youth group? And they'll raise it over the next year and pay you back. But we've got to get this family over here. It's a dangerous situation. We've got to reunite a family. I have $2,500 in hand. And another $25 that is just, Lord, tell me when. So when, we need another $5,000. And it will be paid back. Now, some people who've given the money have said it's not a loan, it's a donation. Others, it's a loan. But when I think of it, and I think of that passage, where it's, as you've done it for the least of these, you've done it also for me. How much more clear a gospel call can it be? Like, how much more clear can it be? If you take care of the young, if you worship in spirit and in truth, if you visit the sick and the shut-in, and if you feed the hungry and clothe the naked, how much more clear can it be? And I don't think I'm being Pollyanna here, but it really seems to be that in these 4 areas, there are others, this is not completely comprehensive, but in these 4 areas, these are ways in which God has spoken clearly throughout time, in His creation, through His prophets, and His kings, most particularly, of course, through His Son, and said, you want to know what true religion is? This is what it looks like. this is what it looks like. If you want to say you're worshiping in spirit and in truth, this is what it looks like. It looks like caring for the young. I had a biblical reference I was going to throw in, but I forgot my biblical reference. Remember that one? I didn't forget the reference, I forgot to put it in. Remember that one about the disciples keeping the kids away? And Jesus saying, no. Let them come to me, because if you want to know what the kingdom of heaven is like, that's what it's like. It's better, if you prevent them from coming to me, better that you had a millstone thrown around your neck and you were put into the deepest part of the sea. It's so important. So, the young, worshiping in spirit and in truth, our liturgy, our music. Got to talk about that a lot. Visiting those who, they can't get out, and often are hurting them. Even if they're not lonely people. And social justice. Seems to me that's where God's leading the church. Now there's a side of this that I have to address, to speak to. And it's the place of the church as a structure. I'm very unsettled about what I see happening to the institutional structure of the church. Now, as an institution, I'm not an institutionally oriented person. It is not my best hope to be on every diocesan committee. I'm not particularly well known in iconoclast. I don't really care whether people call me Lord or Reverend. Made me very suspicious once upon a time when I became an archdeacon and people called me Venerable. Because there's a tremendous danger that if people keep calling you these things, you might actually one day wake up and actually believe you are Reverend or Venerable. That's dangerous right there. But at the same time, it bothers me tremendously, and as I say, it leaves me very unsettled, that we seem to be treating structures of our church, indeed our churches themselves, as if they were merely disposable assets. And by that I mean, amongst other things, we consider that we have too many church buildings and that we need to close and sell them and use the money for other stuff. I don't think we have too many church buildings. I think we have too little effective ministry. That's what I think. Last year at the Diocesan Clergy Conference, Bishop Mark MacDonald, who's the bishop to Aboriginal and First Nations people in Canada, spoke to us about the needs of First Nations and Aboriginal people. And in the context of his speaking with us, to us, I wish I could quote, but I can't. I can just give you the sense of it. He said, it bothers him to see all the churches that we're closing down, because he says, we're making our decisions about closing down churches not based on where ministry is needed, but on who has the money. And he says it seems that the churches that are being closed, i.e. the ones that don't have enough money to sustain themselves, tend to be in the areas of poverty and greatest need. And we're eliminating our presence in those areas. Do we have too many physical structures? Not if we were to put them to appropriate use. Indeed, I think if we were to put our structures, our physical structures to appropriate use, what we would find is we need even more. And we would be church planting as opposed to church shutting. And it seems to me that one of the things that God is calling the church to do, as He is calling us to realize His ministry and spiritual call, is to challenge us and to demand that we look at the resources necessary to fulfill our calling. And if I could put that in a little bit of context, and I hope this doesn't sound too grandiose, I hope it doesn't sound inflated, I hope it sounds how I intended it when I put this sermon together. If it wasn't for the physical structure, the physical plant called St. Mary's Anglican Church, Kirkland Boulevard, Kirkland, the past 22, 23 years of youth ministry that have happened in this place and because of this place would not have happened. If it wasn't for the physical structure of St. Mary's, with all its warts and failings, being in this place, Kirkland Day, where we have, I don't know, it has to be over 1,000 people contacts and kids' crafts and conversation. It has to be. Wouldn't be happening. We are still the only church group, except for 1 year, we are the only church group with presence at Kirkland Day. That is unique to us. If it wasn't for the physical structure of St. Mary's Anglican Church in Kirkland, music camp and science camp and all that flows from that would not exist in its present form. It may exist somewhere else, in some form, but the uniqueness of it in this place would not exist. It exists because this place exists. And, to carry on the image, once upon a time in this church, and you sort of start seeing the finger of God and the breath of the Spirit hovering over stuff. It was in the parish profile in 1989 that I read concerns about music and the direction of music in St. Mary's. Long time before Marie appeared on the scene. And there was the recognition that the music that was going on at that point was feeding the need of a very, very small group of people. And there had to be openness to a new style and a new way of doing liturgical music. And one of the reasons I was brought on board is because in those days, MS has stolen this from me, but in those days I played guitar. And there was a Sunday where after the service, I will not identify the person, a person came into my office who was heavily involved in the music program. And we had done a radical piece of music on guitar. How Great Thou Art. And for those of you that know church music, How Great Thou Art, we're not talking radical here. And I am not one of these people, well, now I would be because I can't play anymore, but that was just banging away G, C, and D and hoping that everything fit. I was a reasonable guitar player. And so when we did How Great Thou Art, and I heard the congregation, it seemed evident to me that the congregation was open. This person that sat down with me did so to assure me that he was leaving the church, leaving St. Mary's, because he couldn't put up with, and the rest of that sentence will be left out of the sermon because it would be censored. He did not approve of that. And right there was a dividing line. Now, what he expected me to do was try and soothe and step back and compromise. But the mandate of the corporation and the selection committee, when they brought me on board, was, among other things, to develop music such that it touched people's hearts in a way that music in this place wasn't at that time. God works on our hearts through music, through prayer, through meditation. Without this structure, this container, the music and that whole aspect of things wouldn't exist in its present form. We need our church. In terms of seniors ministry, we don't need the physical structure of St. Mary's in order to maintain and develop our ministry to seniors, sick, and shut-in. We don't, because that takes place somewhere else. But the locus, the starting point for that, not only in St. Mary's case, but certainly including St. Mary's, is a recognition of a call to ministry in this place, and the spiritual growth of individuals that has happened in this church that has led a number of people to feel a call to be involved in this type of ministry. The spiritual growth that takes place in this place leads people to feel a call to a ministry of God to them. Now, I didn't word that quite as precisely as I wanted to, but you get the point. We need the structure. And then social justice. I guess it's getting on 2.5 years ago now. Bethany and I were sitting at a deanery chapter meeting, very poorly attended, very poorly advertised deanery chapter meeting, Glennis Williams was speaking about refugees, about the Times 50th anniversary project and all the rest of it. And I look at Bethany, and we could do this. And then afterwards, and you heard me say this before, I was watching Bethany, Glennis Williams, and Sue Lynn speaking together, and I knew that project was going to happen. I knew we were going to be bringing over a refugee family. Do we need the physical structure of St. Mary's to do that? No. We don't need the physical structure of St. Mary's to do that, except to warehouse all the, furniture that we have. We don't need the physical structure to do that, but we need the physical structure to house the community which recognizes God's call to be involved in that sort of thing. We need our churches. There are other places and other cultures and other climates that perhaps don't need the physical structure of the church as we do in the climate of North America. Nonetheless, the people of God have always needed a place where they could plant the cross and say, this is our rallying point. This is where we come together to listen to God, to celebrate what He's doing, and to learn how to be obedient to His call. St. Mary's needs to be here. It needs to be here. This is part 1. Parts 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 will deal with various elements of that. I think every single one of us in this place, certainly including me, needs to know more about spirituality and prayer and meditation and the inner journey. We need to develop that. We need to develop music. It's wonderful what we got, but we need to develop it. Maybe we need to encourage more of us, of you, to give your phrase or your something that's been going on in your brain, so that Marie, Greg, maybe me can take that little bit of a phrase and turn it into music for worship. There is something about being involved in leading liturgy as well that nurtures the soul. And so we need to find ways, some are very obvious, some are less obvious, getting more of our community involved in worship. We need to continue to develop our youth ministry, and our ministry to seniors, our outreach ministry, and our social justice stuff. And so, this is the first Sunday back. This is setting the theme. The theme is, the ministry of God's kingdom needs His church. It needs the structure, and it needs the people. And I really hope that this fall season you're on board with asking the question, how can I be more involved in what God is doing in His world today? Now let's pray.
Amen.
God, we thank You for Your call to ministry and for the opportunities that You provide. We thank You for this place, for those who, through several generations now, have worked hard to make sure that St. Mary's is here. Pray that we would be faithful stewards in our generation. We pray for the community and communities around us. Again, on the surface, so strong, but with so many needs as well. We thank You for the many ways in which You're leading us in our worship and all the ministries in this place. We pray for the resources that we need to have this building a fit place for worship. Pray for the community around us, many of whom are looking for spiritual truth and reality, some of whom are finding their way back to church. Father, open our hearts and minds to Your will and word. Give us obedient hearts so that we can be faithful to our calling. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.